Life isn't just about what happens to you. It's about how you see what happens to you. Two people can go through the same situation, yet come out with completely different experiences. The difference? Perspective. Your perspective determines how you interpret life's events. It shapes your emotions, your decisions, and ultimately, your destiny. If you see obstacles as roadblocks, you'll feel stuck. But if you see them as stepping stones, you'll keep moving forward. Consider a rainy day. One person sees it as gloomy, frustrating, a reason to complain. Another sees it as refreshing, a time to rest, an opportunity to appreciate life indoors. The rain is the same, but the experience is completely different because of perspective. The same principle applies in life's challenges. When difficulties arise, you have a choice. Will you see them as unfair burdens or as opportunities to grow? Will you focus on what's missing or on what's possible? Take David facing Goliath. The entire Israelite army saw an unbeatable giant. But David, he saw an opportunity for victory. Same battlefield, same giant, but a different perspective changed everything. Where others saw fear, he saw faith. Where others saw defeat, he saw destiny. Your perspective is the lens through which you see the world. If that lens is clouded with doubt, fear, and negativity, everything will seem overwhelming. But if you clean that lens with faith, gratitude, and confidence, you'll start seeing possibilities where others see problems. Think about the story of the 12 spies sent to explore the promised land. 10 of them came back saying, the land is great, but the giants are too big. We can't win. They saw themselves as grasshoppers, small and insignificant. But 2 of them, Joshua and Caleb, saw the same land, the same giants, yet had a different perspective. They said, yes, the land is good, and with God on our side, we are more than able to take it. What made the difference? The 10 saw obstacles, the 2 saw opportunity. The 10 focused on their limitations, the 2 focused on God's power. Their perspective shaped their reality. One group stayed in the wilderness, and the other stepped into the promise. When life gets hard, your perspective will either keep you stuck or push you forward. You may not be able to control every situation, but you can control how you see it. You can choose to look at setbacks as setups for something greater. You can choose to see waiting seasons as preparation, not punishment. You can choose to focus on what you have, not what you lack. Life doesn't always go the way we plan. You set out with a vision, you work hard, you do everything right, but then things don't turn out as expected. The promotion doesn't come through, the business struggles, the relationship falls apart, or an unexpected crisis knocks you off course. In those moments, it's easy to feel discouraged, to wonder why things aren't working out, to question if you'll ever reach your goals. But what if what looks like a setback is actually a setup for something greater? A setback is never the end of the story, it's just a part of the journey. Just like a puzzle, when you look at a single piece by itself, it doesn't make sense. It seems random, disconnected, even frustrating. But when you step back and see the full picture, every piece has a place. Every moment, even the painful ones, are shaping something bigger than you can see right now. Look at the life of Joseph. He had a dream that he would be a great leader, yet his path to that destiny was filled with setbacks. His own brothers betrayed him, throwing him into a pit. He was sold into slavery, falsely accused, and thrown into prison. If he had judged his future by any one of those moments, he could have believed that his dream was over. But what looked like a series of defeats was actually a divine setup. The pit led to Egypt. Egypt led to the palace, and the palace led to his purpose, saving a nation. The very things that seemed to be pushing him down were actually positioning him for his calling. Sometimes what seems like rejection is actually redirection. A closed door isn't always a no. It's often a sign that there's something better ahead. You might have lost an opportunity, but what if that loss is making room for something greater? What if that disappointment is leading you to the right people, the right job, the right season? A setback doesn't mean failure, it means you're in process. A seed doesn't sprout the moment it's planted. It spends time in the dark, hidden beneath the soil, before it breaks through the ground. That waiting season, that hidden season is not wasted time, it's preparation time. The roots are growing, the foundation is being set, and at the right time, the breakthrough will come. Setbacks test your patience, your faith, and your resilience. They challenge you to grow in ways you wouldn't if everything went smoothly. They strip away what's unnecessary. They refine your character, and they prepare you for what's next. What looks like a delay is often divine timing at work, orchestrating events that will make sense later. Life has a way of making us focus on what's right in front of us. We see our struggles, our delays, our disappointments, and it's easy to get discouraged. But what we see is only a small part of the picture. God sees the whole story. His vision isn't limited by time, circumstances, or obstacles. While we are focused on the present, God is orchestrating the future. While we see problems, He sees purpose. While we feel stuck, He sees the path ahead. Imagine standing at the base of a mountain. All you can see are the rocks in front of you, the steep incline, the difficulty of the climb. But if you could step back and see from above, you'd see the whole journey, the valleys, the turns, the destination waiting at the top. That's how life works. From our limited view, things might not make sense. But God sees the beginning and the end. He sees why certain doors needed to close. He sees why you had to wait. He sees the connections you haven't made yet, the opportunities that haven't unfolded, the growth that's happening even when you don't feel it. Think about the story of Moses leading the Israelites out of Egypt. When they reached the Red Sea, they saw an impossible barrier. Behind them, Pharaoh's army was closing in. From their perspective, they were trapped, but God saw a path they couldn't see. He saw the sea splitting before it even happened. He saw victory while they were still panicking. What looked like a dead end was actually a doorway to deliverance. Sometimes God allows delays, detours, and disappointments because He knows what we don't. If you got everything you wanted right now, it may not be the blessing you think it is. Maybe that job you prayed for would have taken you away from your true calling. Maybe that relationship you wanted so badly would have held you back from the person you were meant to become. Maybe the season of waiting you're in is actually God's way of protecting you from stepping into something before you're ready. We often pray for doors to open, but sometimes the best answer is when God keeps a door shut. Because He sees what's ahead. He sees the right connections, the right timing, the right opportunities that will lead to something greater than what you're asking for. When things don't go as planned, it's not because God isn't working, it's because He's working on something bigger. What you see as a delay, He sees as development. What you see as a loss, He sees as preparation. What you see as the end of the road, He sees as the beginning of something new. Faith isn't about what you can see with your natural eyes. It's about what you believe in your heart before there's any evidence of it. It's trusting that what God has spoken over your life will come to pass, even when everything around you suggests otherwise. Faith is the ability to see the invisible, to believe in the impossible, and to walk in confidence before the breakthrough arrives. When Noah built the ark, there was no sign of rain. The sky was clear. The ground was dry. And for years, people mocked him for preparing for something that had never happened before. But Noah didn't need to see the flood to believe it was coming. He had faith in what God had spoken. Because he acted on faith, he was prepared when the storm came. Faith moves before the evidence appears. Abraham was told he would be the father of many nations, but for years he had no child. His circumstances screamed that the promise was impossible. He and Sarah were too old. Nature had run its course, and from a human perspective, it was over. But faith doesn't rely on what is natural. It relies on what is supernatural. Abraham chose to believe God's promise even when everything in the physical world said otherwise. And in the right season, Isaac was born, not because Abraham saw it first, but because he believed it first. Faith is what allows you to speak victory while you're still in the battle. It's what enables you to praise God before the healing, before the promotion, before the breakthrough. It's saying, God, I don't see it yet, but I trust you. I don't have all the answers, but I know you are working. When the Israelites marched around Jericho, the walls didn't fall after the first lap. They didn't even fall after the second or third. For 6 days, nothing changed. If they had only believed in what they could see, they would have given up. But faith keeps marching even when nothing is happening. Faith keeps believing even when prayers seem unanswered. Faith keeps declaring the promise even when the problem seems bigger. And on the seventh day, when they shouted in obedience, the walls came crashing down. Sometimes what God has spoken over your life won't make sense in the natural. The situation may look too big, the obstacles too strong, the odds too impossible. But faith isn't about what you see, it's about what you know in your spirit. It's about believing that God is faithful, that He finishes what He starts, and that His word will never return void. Faith sees beyond the present struggle. It holds on to the promise before the fulfillment. It walks in expectation, knowing that what God has declared will come to pass. Life doesn't always take us on a straight path. You have a vision, a dream, a plan for how things should unfold, but then unexpected twists come. Doors close, opportunities shift, setbacks arise, and suddenly you find yourself on a detour. It wasn't what you planned, it wasn't what you prayed for, but what if that detour is actually God's divine direction? What feels like a delay is often divine redirection towards something greater. Joseph had a dream of leadership, of influence, of making a difference. But instead of stepping into that dream immediately, he found himself thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, and wrongfully imprisoned. It looked like his life had taken a wrong turn. Every step seemed to be moving him further away from his destiny. But in reality, every detour was leading him exactly where God wanted him to be. The pit positioned him for the palace. What looked like a setback was actually a setup for something greater. Moses had a passion to deliver his people from slavery, but after killing an Egyptian in anger, he fled to the wilderness. For 40 years, it seemed like his purpose had been lost. He was tending sheep instead of leading people. But that wilderness was not a mistake, it was preparation. It was in the detour that Moses learned leadership, patience, and dependence on God. And at the right time, God called him back to Egypt, not as a runaway, but as a deliverer. Many times, the road to your destiny will not be the one you expected. You thought you'd already be further along. You thought that relationship would last. You thought that job was your breakthrough. But when things don't go as planned, it doesn't mean God has forgotten you. It means He is guiding you in a way that you can't yet understand. The Apostle Paul planned to preach in Asia, but every time he tried to go, the Holy Spirit blocked him. From a human perspective, it made no sense. Paul was doing the right thing with the right heart, yet every door closed. What he didn't realize was that God was redirecting him toward a greater mission. Instead of Asia, Paul was led to Europe, where the gospel spread in ways he never imagined. His detour wasn't denial, it was divine. When you hit an unexpected roadblock, when life takes you in a direction you never anticipated, you have a choice. You can resist, get frustrated, and try to force your own way, or you can trust that God sees what you cannot. Every closed door, every delay, every unexpected turn is part of a bigger plan. It may not make sense now, but God is positioning you for something greater than you ever imagined. The way you see the world determines what you receive from it. If your vision is small, your opportunities will be small. If your mindset is limited, your potential will be limited. But when you widen your vision, you expand your life. You step into bigger opportunities, greater blessings, and the full purpose God has for you. Too often, people live with a narrow perspective. They settle for what's comfortable, what's familiar, what seems reasonable. They let past failures, disappointments, or the opinions of others create a ceiling over their potential. But God never called you to live small. He didn't create you to just get by, to stay in the same place, or to live beneath your purpose. He designed you for growth, for expansion, for influence. But for that to happen, you have to be willing to see beyond where you are right now. When God told Abraham to look up at the stars and count them, it was more than just an illustration. It was an invitation to think bigger. Abraham and Sarah had no children, and in the natural it seemed impossible. But God was saying, you're looking at what you don't have. I'm showing you what's possible. You're focused on your limitations. I'm focused on my promise. The moment Abraham expanded his vision, he aligned with what God had already planned. Peter was a fisherman, and his whole world revolved around catching fish. But when Jesus called him, he said, "Follow me, and I will make you a fisher of men." In other words, Peter, you've been thinking too small. You've been focused on fish, but I'm calling you to change lives. Peter had to shift his perspective to step into his destiny. He had to let go of what was familiar to embrace something greater. Many times, the biggest thing holding you back isn't your situation, it's your vision. You've gotten used to a certain way of thinking. You've accepted a level of success, a level of peace, a level of blessing. But God is saying there's more opportunity, more impact, more favor. But you have to be willing to see beyond what's in front of you. The Israelites stood on the edge of the promised land, but when the spies went in, most of them came back with a negative report. They saw giants, obstacles, and impossibilities. But Joshua and Caleb saw something different. They saw victory. The land was the same, but their vision was different. The ones who saw defeat never entered the promise, but the ones who saw victory walked into their destiny. What you focus on will determine what you step into. If you keep looking at the obstacles, the challenges, and the reasons why things won't work, you'll stay stuck. But if you lift your eyes, if you believe bigger, if you choose to see possibilities instead of problems, you'll step into the life God has been preparing for you all along. Where you are right now is not where you are meant to stay. The struggles you're facing, the limitations you see, the delays you're experiencing, they are not the end of your story. They are only a chapter, a season, a stepping stone toward what God has prepared for you.